Hello, everybody. Welcome to Brewing Boundaries. I am your host, Lindsay Idaluca. It has been a little while. It is so great to kind of, I guess, see you all, but I'm not really seeing you. I am really excited to talk to you guys about today's guest. So today's guest is special because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Now, if you are joining this podcast, then you know it has a lot to do with mental health. If you know me, you know it has a lot to do with mental health. So today's guest is a true force for equity and inclusion in healthcare, as well as mental health. We have Sandra Victorino on, who is the co-founder of Latino Mental Health Network of Rhode Island. She has 20 years of experience in the field. She is also the chair of the Mental Health Association of Rhode Island, as well as the vice chair at the Women's Fund of Rhode Island. So she has a very long list of accomplishments. She is a wonderful, wonderful person and is doing really deep and powerful work in the state. She's really helping to shape educational future rooted in cultural respect, community empowerment, and she just has a really strong driving compassion for breaking barriers, as well as working with the Latino community and with women. So I am honored to have her with us today, and without further ado, let's have her on. So it is my honor to welcome Sandra Victorino today, chair of the Mental Health Association of Rhode Island, as well as the vice chair at the Women's Fund of Rhode Island. Sandra, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So Sandra, I was so excited to get you on the podcast, not only as somebody that has a couple decades of experience in the mental health field, but someone who is a strong advocate in the state of Rhode Island for mental health care and for diversity in different populations as well. So I kind of wanted to start off this mental health month talking to you about what is going on in Rhode Island right now when it comes to mental health.
So we do have, we're lucky enough to be a pretty small enough state where we can shift very quickly when things are happening. And so I think, we've had different kind of time limits and zones of since I've been here. I moved here in 2008 to Rhode Island. And so I speak from someone's experience that's been here for 16 years. Evolution in healthcare certainly takes time. And then with the pandemic, we had some blatant kind of spaces and awareness of where our challenges existed. Okay. And so we were able to kind of come together as a collective and start to address concerns and issues that were happening. There's been different people doing different work. And then and we've been more strategic, which I think historically we've tried to be. Right. And then things have started and they fade away. And I think in the last 5 years, there's been a really great cadence of private-public partnerships, nonprofits coming together, really doing work together and collaboratively. And if someone isn't a part of the effort, how do people make sure they strategize in the best way ability in order for us to really make the most of the funds that we have within our state to really elevate and support those that are the most vulnerable within our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. You said that really well. Thank you. And I love that you say so we can support and advocate, because a lot of people, they would like to do that, but maybe they don't know how. So can we kind of talk about that a little bit? How can people get involved?
So I think there are different stages. It depends on, I was recently talking to someone and they're like, I'm not someone that goes out and marches and does all of these things. I have anxiety, what else could I do? And so we really started to talk about their strengths. And, I know I've always been someone that's been strength-based and thinking about where are we best able to use our passion and our skills that naturally come to us and be able to elevate the spaces that need the support. I mean, we in Rhode Island have so many different nonprofits. Do we need to create another one? Probably not. Do we still have gaps? How do we work together? And so that's why I always say, skills are needed in every single place, and it might not be where we have always been.
Yeah.
So sometimes for me specifically, I ended up finding myself within policy spaces. So I'm, the chair for the Mental Health Association of Rhode Island, but I'm also the vice chair for the Women's Fund of Rhode Island. So both policy spaces that are really trying to elevate through legislation and awareness and education and all of these things. It's not what I used to do every day of my work. I used to do
Mm.
individual therapy for folks, and then I started to go into more of the macro. And now I can see where the intersection of both passion and my work come together. And so it's more about making it a more natural fit rather than forcing ourselves to fit somewhere just because it might sound like a great idea, because then we become burnt out. And so I think that that's
Absolutely.
one of the levels that people don't always understand, is that if we're not finding our passion and we're not connecting it with our natural skills strengths, then it ends up really creating some friction there.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you bring that up because as a licensed mental health counselor yourself, people think that they don't think policy right away, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a really great example of how you can really take your passions and your skills, blending them together and making a difference. And on top of that, you mentioned working as the vice chair at the Women's Fund of Rhode Island. And I would kind of like to dive into that a little bit more and what you do for them and for women in Rhode Island.
So one of the things is we can't be everywhere we want to be. And
Mm-hmm.
so then we end up being able to elevate and support the spaces. So I've been on the Women's Fund of Rhode Island since 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been just serving as a board member in order for where I'm needed and how I'm needed and what capacity to be able to support the mission and elevate really the education and awareness. Kelly Nevins does a beautiful job of like going out and educating folks and providing any kind of just awareness in the very same way that Lori Marie does that at the Mental Health Association. I mean, two very powerful and strong women
Yeah.
that are really dedicated to the work and the causes that they're part of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to be able to support them in the best way that I can possible. And sometimes, my skill set goes anywhere from doing some organizational development to being a therapist. And sometimes it's just, being a sounding board to people, or at other times it's like, who are we missing at the table? What are the connections that need to be made? Because I'm in different spaces that they may not be in, and vice versa. How do we support each other to continue to elevate the work?
And that's a great point, kind of hitting upon certain barriers and certain gaps, and whether it be in a specific area, within a specific population. Can we dive deeper a little bit into that?
So I think one of the things that I naturally found myself in bilingual bicultural therapist. I
Mm-hmm.
naturally found myself within the spaces of seeing some of the gaps that I saw within the Latino communities. So I am the co-founder of the Latino Mental Health Network that myself and Jenny Gavira started many years ago, with just the thought of what we didn't have when we came into the field.
Yeah.
And so then we started to really have conversations and create spaces for people to have conversations that were in the field or felt that they were the onlys at time. I mean, I think many of us felt like we were sometimes the only bilingual bicultural therapists within our department. And then it grew where it was not just about Spanish speaking, but other languages, and how did
Yeah.
we bring awareness about other languages. And then it was about other, kind of marginalized spaces and places. And so we kind of opened the door for some of those conversations, but at the same time also kept on doing work around the Latino spaces, and have partnered up with the Latino Policy Institute to really create awareness, with the hopes of it bringing other communities along as well, right? Because
Mm.
we are a large Latino community in Rhode Island. How do we do that? We've been a great immigrant state of accepting folks from different countries, but we don't always have the roadmap to make sure it's a safe space, or that we have all of the spaces and places together and in place for what's required. So
Yeah.
language was always one of the things that I thought about, right?
Of course.
Cultural linguistic appropriate services, class standards. I think
Mm.
someone told me have only been around for 20 years. Um, And so those implementation and processes are something that are super valuable and important to be within all of our systems, not, our healthcare systems certainly have put them forward, but still continue to navigate through that as well.
Yeah.
And so our smaller private practices or our smaller spaces, what does that mean for them? And how do we continue to provide support for those? In my mind, most people want to do good.
Yeah.
They just need the information and the tools to be able to do that. And
Hmm.
so I really appreciate that we're having conversations like this. I'm a commissioner for the Commission of Rhode Island for the Commission of Health Advocacy and Equity. And we have these conversations as well there. Like, how do we make sure we continue to elevate these conversations and bring the resources where they're necessary? Because sometimes those pockets stay very isolated and
Yes,
people don't know what they don't know.
of course.
And so some people may not know that that pocket exists, and
Hmm.
in that pocket may also not know the resources that they may be able to obtain. And so
Yeah.
how do we make those connections and make sure we create a bridge rather than continue to maintain isolation?
Absolutely. And that's what we're talking about, for those who are listening or watching and don't understand when we say barriers, it's those people that need access to mental health care or need access to resources and they don't know that it's available, or it might not be readily available to them. In their immediate neighborhood. So those are really important things, Sandra, that you're working on. Thank you for that.
Welcome. It brings me a lot of joy. I haven't received. I do get tired sometimes, but
I bet.
but I think it's natural. It's a natural flow to, I
Mm.
always feel like Rhode Island helped me build myself as an adult, and so I feel like it's the one thing that I can do is to give back to Rhode Islanders in this way as well.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So as we enter Mental Health Month, we talked a little bit. You had mentioned bilingual and bicultural, and something that we don't necessarily talk enough about is sometimes the cultural stigma that comes behind mental health. And while we have made leaps and bounds, I think that which is wonderful, there's still a long way to go. And there is also a really strong stigma when it comes to certain cultures, especially those who are very, very rooted in religion, that, mental health isn't necessarily what you need. So, can we open that discussion a little bit?
I think, one of the things within my, like, even the Latino culture, my Mexican American
Mm,
identity, I'm first generation. My family wasn't really aware of what I was doing and how I was doing it and the purpose of it all.
yeah.
So I was always a mystery to my family. They're like, oh, she's like likes to be in the middle of things, and so therefore she's a therapist.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that I did was as I was learning resources, I would bring them back to my family. And so it was really cool because I'd be like, hey, this is what's happening. And most of the time they thought I was a little odd, but I would still continue to bring it forward. And I think, it took probably I feel like around 8 years for like
Wow.
everybody to kind of come along into the idea that this is the work that I was doing. This is how I was doing it. I was in college when I was in my 20s and I was explaining it already. And then by the time I was around 28, I think most people were like, yep, that's what she does. And this is what she does. Like if my parents were
Good for
asked
you.
what I did and what
Hmm.
I was doing, they were able to explain the work that I was doing. It became a little more confusing when I went into the macro spaces for
Yeah,
them,
I bet.
but right for that individual side of things, it was really cool to see the evolution, but then to even see my parents using certain frameworks with my nieces and nephews, which were their grandchildren and their children. And now to the point that I have a great nephew that he understands what it is to take a deep breath, right? And to take
That's
space.
beautiful.
And he's 5 years old in, these bilingual, bicultural households that naturally wouldn't have had the space or the place to think about this. And that's what I tell everybody. I'm like, our families were working, they were immigrants and they were working and that's what they were doing. And there wasn't any time for thinking or thought or to do this kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
this is naturally what I feel we can give back to our elders because they work so hard that this is the way we can honor them.
Yeah.
And so I have conversations about what is it to honor our previous generations, and what is it to guide our future generations, and what do we desire to have. And
Yeah.
these are the conversations that I culturally just have, because we're still a collective as Latinos and many immigrant communities that come in. We're still collectives.
Yeah.
And then, my husband is from New England, white male, and we talk about what it means for him to come back to collective.
Yeah.
Right? So it serves us all to be able to carry together. And we saw that during, the pandemic time frame, is that as we all came together to work together, we were able to accomplish a lot more. We saw, systems working together. We saw hospitals working together. We saw government working together. We saw people were just moving everything forward. And we
Yeah.
were able to go from a society that wasn't online to society that now we can do mostly everything virtual.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, of course, we still need that human connection, but that's how far we went in a few months, where a lot of people were saying, no, we can't do that.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden there was a need and we pushed through it. And so I often think about that time. I'm like, if we can do that, then what can we do now?
Yeah. That's a really great analogy. That's a really great point, is when you have to do something, when you're, for lack of a better term, looking it in the face, then you figure it out, right? Yeah, that's a really solid point. Um,
Absolutely.
and that kind of brings me to another point that I was thinking of when you were talking about the collective and working all together, continuing forward in the new kind of environment that we are in right now. What are some things that we can do for each other to continue to break those cycles, those stigma cycles?
I think it's finding our people. And if we haven't found our people, I think a lot of times we tend to think that our people are the ones that we've had historically.
Hmm.
And they are our people, but sometimes we need new people to our like box. And what does
Hmm.
that mean, for us? And I think sometimes we outgrow people outgrow us. We're at
Mm.
all different spaces and places. And so I often tell people that it's, where is it that you're the most you in those spaces, even if you may be a little dysfunctional, but you have someone that guides you and that
Yeah.
says, hey, how can I support you, and
Mm.
can be there as well. I mean, we're just all going sometimes so quickly that I think we feel that it has to be all in one space,
Yep.
that we get the supports, and that's not necessarily true. I mean, we can be multiple different people and multiple different spaces, and we can go all the way from finding peace and space and by ourselves to being with a collective of people. And I mean, I can be in a large group of people that are like-minded and feel super comfortable in those spaces, all the way to being in nature and walking by myself. But what is it that my body is calling for in that moment is what I
Mm.
always ask myself. What is it that I need in this moment? What is it that I need after certain things? Because certain things are taxing.
Yes.
Like I'm like, I don't want to go to that event. I signed up for it 2 months ago. I thought it was a good idea. It
I do
still
that
is
all the
a
time.
good idea, right? It still is
Yep.
a good idea, but what do I, and I want to be there. And so I show up, and I have a friend that often tells me that he's like, once you show up, you're good. You're always good once you show up.
Yeah.
And it's true. Once I'm there, I'm like, I remember why I did it. But I always leave space for myself afterwards, just in case. Like, people are always like, hey, do you want to meet up afterwards? This and that. I'm like, I don't know if I'll be able to, because I don't know how I'll feel afterwards. And so I leave myself that wiggle room for afterwards to be able to honor myself too, in case I need to just break away. But I still continue to give to community, and community gives to me, and then I'm able to give to myself. And so that it's just, I think the more we honor who we are and what we need for ourselves, the
Mm.
easier it is for us to go in and out in a very fluid, natural way.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to say that. And here on this show, it's called Brewing Boundaries, so we talk about that a lot. We talk about setting boundaries, and something that you mentioned is setting a boundary when you need to withdraw. And I think that that's something that's more difficult than ever in the time that we live in now, because people assume that you should have access to others 24/7.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Um, and honestly, one of the things that it's hard for me too. I have a large family.
Hmm.
I think about, sometimes I used to think about like, oh, they really need me, and I'm like, it's kind of like a little bit like selfish and egotistical in some ways. I'm like, they're grown people; they can do for themselves.
Hmm.
Um, but I was always a caretaker, so
Yep.
I had to figure out what that meant, right? And how to do that differently, and not just abandon either, but say, you
Yes.
know what, I'm going to try something different and new. And sometimes I just need to go away because I can't hold that boundary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
that's
get
okay
that.
too. And I
Yep.
say that to people. I'm like, I just need to go away because I don't know how to hold this boundary right now.
Yeah, no, that I mean that's such a great point. I mean, I completely feel that when it comes to, being a helper and then being in a helping profession and just naturally being that way. The taking time for yourself is increasingly more difficult for people that are naturally um, have those natural helper tendencies.
Yeah. And I think it's finding, I often tell people that if I'm dishing it, I'm also doing it.
Hmm.
So if
Okay.
I'm giving the advice, or if I'm in the middle of a coaching or mentoring session, or even when I've been in the therapy space and I'm saying something to someone, and then I recognize that in that moment is where it's the first time I'm really hearing myself say it out loud.
Yeah.
Um, and it might be reflective of me to do that as well. I'm like, oh yeah.
Hmm.
In friendship world, like sometimes when I'm giving friend advice, they'll like come back to me, and they'll be like, how's are you doing that? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I may not be doing it. And I'm like, you know what? I think it's worth me giving it a try. And so now we're two people working on that, like doing that together,
Together. Yep.
right? And so that's kind of cool. It's like it's a way of being able to kind of hold ourselves accountable without having to have someone always on us too. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of like my own accountability tool, is that I'm like, I hear myself sometimes. I'm like, nah, maybe you need to reflect on this a little bit more for yourself as well. And so like, I take my time and I figure out what that time looks like for myself, because I think, as humans, we're always evolving and always changing. And I think that that's one of the things that often limits us, is that we think that once we get to this magical age or magical space,
Hmm.
we're going to figure it out and we're going to know it all. And we just don't. And so,
Yes.
like, that's just it. That's all we have.
Yep. And I mean, I love the point that it is a journey, not a destination.
It
I think that that
absolutely
is,
is.
yes, I think that's something that's very, it's just not talked about enough.
No, and I honestly, I feel like a lot of times I've met people that have said, my parents never argued in front of me, so I never saw an argument. And then I thought when I was 18, you magically just didn't worry about things. And so because
Mm.
there was actually no conflict around her, that she was just like, all right, magically everything's gonna be fine when I'm 18. And she's like, and then I got to 18 and I was like, wait a minute, like,
Oh
so
no.
right, right, so that's like a household that really tried to protect a child from not seeing conflict and not
Yep.
understanding conflict resolution, to to the extreme other side that we see, where we see too much conflict in a household, right? So both
Yep.
of them can be just as bad.
There's
So we need
balance.
to be able to talk about, some of the struggles, but also hold those boundaries of not oversharing, right? But I think all of those are important things, because if we're not modeling that and we're not saying it, then there also is a thought process that that doesn't exist, and maybe I'm the
Hmm.
only one struggling with that.
So no, I think that's really important, and that's something that we try to talk about on this show too. Is communication. Communication is something
Hmm.
that is really at the crux of a lot of mental health issues, and it comes back to, within reason, I like to say, being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
I think that
Yes.
people have a problem with that more than
I,
ever
I
in society today.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, when you said that, it reminded me. So when I became a therapist at 24,
Hmm.
and I was probably around 28. And I remember one time one of my clients walked in. We'd been working for several months together, and I was like, what am I doing that they're just not getting it. Like, what's
Mm-hmm.
happening? Like, what am I doing? Did they need something different? What are they doing that I'm not catching? Like, what is going on? And then I remembered that I had been providing therapy for 4 years at that point, 3 to 4 years. It was either 27, 28. And I remembered that I had been within the therapy world for that long, which meant I was just hearing therapeutic concepts.
Mm.
I wasn't dealing with grad school anymore, so I wasn't really facing uncomfortable things over and over and over and over again.
Good point.
And I wasn't a new therapist, so I wasn't just dealing with newness over and over and over again. I was starting to become kind of like, it's like moving. I was moving
Yeah.
in a rhythm. I had a cadence. I was doing it. And then I thought to myself, I'm like, you're no longer really making yourself uncomfortable. So I was no longer in an uncomfortable state and really didn't understand how long it took to become comfortable with something or deal with the anxieties that come
Mm.
with being the good anxieties of being uncomfortable. And so I started to challenge myself to do something new every year.
I
And
love
every
that.
year I do something new. I do something that challenges myself, that's outside of my norm,
Mm-hmm.
that isn't, and I'm not supposed to master it. I'm just supposed to do it. And so
Love that.
I've ran half marathons. I've gone.
Oh,
I learned how to rock climb. I've gone skydiving. I've learned how to swim. I've
cool.
parasailing. This year I went to do an art residency. I hadn't really sat down and did artwork in 20 years. And so I went away and I did this, and it was uncomfortable. And I was in Mexico. I wanted to reconnect with my roots. So I, it was like the anxiety of going someplace new, the anxiety of being
Mm.
there for 4 weeks. And I'm like, you're going to be fine. You've done all the research. You've done what you need to do. This is where you need to be. And
Yeah.
so I was part of a drum troupe one year, and I don't play the drums. And
Cool.
so, yes. So like all of those things, we can do that in a safe way and also continue to extend ourselves for growth. So we understand, like when my great nephew was putting on his socks, I was like, oh my God, isn't this interesting? I forgot that it was so difficult to sometimes put on your socks,
Good
right?
point.
Like
Yeah.
to like be able to stretch yourself onto your foot and then put it precisely on your foot and then
Yep.
put the back of the heel. Like I wouldn't have really, like I was just like mesmerized, and I was like, oh my God, like this is adorable. And it's like he is using all of his brain power and skills that he has up to this point to be able to do that. And how
Yeah.
beautiful is that, right?
Yeah.
But I think if I hadn't made myself uncomfortable for all those years, I don't know if I would have caught it the same way. I might have just been
Yeah.
like, oh my God, can you hurry up, kid? Let's go. Let me put them
Yep.
on for you so we can hurry up.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, I was like, all right, I have time for this process. And we're going to let him figure this out because this is an important process for him.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that, because I think that really brings to some perspective to things that are often seen as mundane, and I say that in quotes,
Mm-hmm.
because those things that you don't really think of every single day that are, routine, that you maybe don't appreciate as much.
Yeah. And I think we forget that at one point it was uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and that we mastered it and that we did it. And I apparently need a constant reminder in order to remember. And so
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
it works out. But yeah, no, I think it's really, really important that we try to figure out ways that we can do that in a healthy, whatever is healthy for us, you know.
Yeah.
So in that way, it's extending us, not like tearing us down, because
Yep.
that's also can happen if we overextend ourselves in trying to do that.
For sure. And you used a term earlier that I just wanted to highlight. You said good anxiety. And I think that the word anxiety is thrown out just, very run of the mill, along with, unfortunately, many other things that are actually diagnoses, with TikTok and the internet and all this kind of stuff. But there anxiety is there for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
I talk about like the comfortable level of anxiety to get growth. So can you kind of talk to our listeners a little bit more about that?
So I think that there's, it's one is knowing where it shows up and
Mm.
where like I understand from my body through meditation and other practices that I've done is that when I have like concern anxiety, it comes from the back of my arms. When I
Ah,
am releasing and like it's good anxiety, it comes from the front of my arms.
okay.
And so I've been able to kind of gauge my body in a certain way, and I where is it that I'm feeling it and why am I feeling it? And the other question that I ask myself outside of just my body, I say what parameters did you put around this in order for you to have the supports that you need?
Mm.
And so even though I start to feel some, like I could start to feel fear, like I call it fear anxiety, where I want to flee.
Yep.
And then I'm like, no, 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 you brought the right people to provide you
Yep.
support so
Of
you could
course.
stay put.
Yep.
Like you did enough research. So then I have to like just check myself in the moment. And so I have like this list of questions that I ask myself in order for me to be able to do it,
Oh,
which is, did I do enough research?
okay.
Do I have the right supports? Did I put the right activity afterwards? Like and then I make sure all those things are set up. So when I'm in the moment, I'm asking those same questions and I'm like, check, 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 check. Like I've done these things for me. My
That's
past
great.
self took care of my future self. So that way
Mm.
I can just be in this moment.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I love that you say that you have a set of questions. Did you prepare for the before? Did you prepare for the after? That's a great point in showing, the difference between fear, you're not prepared, you don't know what you're doing, and fear, it's just something new. You have done your research, you know how this could go. So,
Yeah. And even in trying something new that I can't anticipate any of those things. I remind myself that I'm like, you made a conscious choice sometimes to be here.
yeah,
Because I'm like, what are the other choices that you had in this matter? You had the choice of staying home
it's
or
true.
being
Not doing
here.
it. Yep.
Like not doing it at all. That was a choice. It was a conscious choice that you made to be here. Now, what is it that up to where can you go? And then if you feel like you need to retreat yourself,
Mm,
well, how do you retreat yourself?
yeah.
Right? So like how do I exit out of this space in case I do feel like I need to leave
Yep.
or need to not be there? Like what is my exit plan?
Exit plan. Yep.
And so that part of it has been part of my brain forever, I think. And it might have been out of like my own trauma response that it ended up being developed, but now I use it in this capacity.
Okay. All right. I think that's
Um,
awesome. I hope our viewers take that, because that's, I mean, I could see myself doing that. I'm a list person. I love to check
yeah,
things off. I'm
yeah.
like, yep, 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 yep. So I think that's a really great idea, something tangible that, listeners can take with them.
And if you think about it in a strength base, and if you're not a list person, you have a list person probably in your life. Like your list person
Sure.
should probably be your accountability partner, right? Like
Yes.
use the strengths around you. That's what
Yep.
I always say. I'm like, there's so many people that like they don't want to go outside of their own like sometimes comfort, but they're willing to give the things that they know how to do well
Yep.
already.
Absolutely.
So it's just a beautiful thing to like be able to create community in that way.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Thank you for that, Sandra. And my last question to you, you kind of went through a list of all of these fantastic things that you've tried, that have demonstrated growth for you. But our motto here is, brewing boundaries, filling your cup. So what is it that you do to fill your cup as a helper before you do all of these amazing things for yourself and others around you?
So I actually probably a few years ago I started to kind of start to do more ancestral work
Oh.
and really starting to like reconnect in that way spiritually. And that's one of the things that as I tell people that you don't have to meditate every morning, but you have to find that kind of mantra or space that
Mm,
allows you to kind of say, things people got you, like you created a world typically that has you,
yeah.
and if it's not physically sometimes it's spiritually, and so I do say good morning to my ancestors in the morning, and it's a practice that I'm also doing with my great nephew, and so he can reconnect. And because in the moments that I may not remember, it's really interesting how a child's like, "Hey, you didn't say good morning." I'm like, "Oh yeah, right." Like it's
Yeah.
really cool. But I think that that's one of the ways that I think I've found peace wherever I am.
Mm.
And then making sure that I'm observant of like nature. Like, I
Yes.
can see the butterflies that are out there. I point them out to people like when there's like, a small little caterpillar on the road, and I'm like, look, there's a caterpillar. And then everybody's like trying to move the caterpillar so it doesn't get stepped on. Right. But those are moments of just simple peace.
Yes.
Um, and I think we need simple peace because, like I said, I do all these other things that really do ground me and provide me a level of sense of gratitude. And
Mhm.
so I'm always really um, grateful for the life that I've created for myself, and I'm grateful for the spaces that I'm in. But I've made sure that I'm in spaces that also fill my cup, so that they're going to continue to provide me the step up or the support, whenever I feel like I just need to sit down.
Yeah.
And, I have people in my life that'll tell me to do that, to sit down and just be and just exist because I've been doing so much. I'm like, I haven't been doing enough. And they're like, no, 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 wait, look, you have done
You've
all of
been,
these things.
yes.
You're doing enough. It's okay. It's time to breathe.
Yep.
And that's okay too. And so, I'm someone that sometimes can't remind myself, but I have done a beautiful job of surrounding myself by people that do tell me to take a breath and to sit down and aren't always taking from my cup.
Yeah.
So,
That's beautiful. Well, we are very grateful to have had you on the show today, Sandra. Thank you so much. And if people want to follow advocacy and policy work from you, or join in the cause, how can they do that?
so I would say, the Mental Health Association of Rhode Island has a really great website. We be posting things on the Latino Mental Health Network of Rhode Island Instagram.
Yeah.
We do also have a web page, but the Instagram seems to be where we tend to put most of our things. We also have an email that we send out, um, that Jennifer does the sending out. I always have to give her kudos because she can
Okay.
organize that really well.
Excellent. Good to know.
So she sends it out from the Latino Mental Health Network, and shares out information and resources that come our way. But I think, even going to the Women's Fund of Rhode Island page and following them through Instagram and their social media ways, all three of them are in the Latino Policy Institute. Like, these are all like my spaces and places of
Yeah.
where I'm trying to help and support and create. And it's just been beautiful to be with such amazing human beings because we all bring our strengths forward in those spaces.
Absolutely. That's great. Sandra, thank you again so much. We appreciate having you on.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me.
That was so